Well, that was a quick look at some of the stories happening in our world right now, but let's go now to our in-depth reports. Thailand has a reputation for natural beauty and, of course, brilliant and generous hospitality. But this week it was clashes resulting from political unrest that captured the world's attention. Anti-government demonstrators swarmed Bangkok's international airport on Tuesday, which halted departing flights. They're demanding nothing less than the resignation of their Prime Minister. So what does this latest clash between opponents and supporters of Thailand's government mean exactly for the country's long-running crisis?
Thailand has some of the world's most beautiful beaches and some of its friendliest smiles. The country has long been considered a paradise for tourists, but for many, it's now almost hell.
I want to go home, yeah. I want to go. I'm supposed to be in Sydney in a few hours, and I want to go back there. But now we'll stay here for maybe one, maybe 2 nights. We don't know. So I don't really understand what's going on with the politics, but I don't want to know. But all I know is I think it's bad form.
Bangkok's $4 billion airport, the main gateway for 14 million tourists a year to a dream holiday, offered nothing but nightmares on Wednesday. Anti-government protesters tightened their grip over the airport, causing chaos in the terminal and triggering speculation of imminent military intervention. All outbound flights were cancelled, and thousands of tourists were left stranded. 4 months of campaigning had come to a head. The protesters are a mix of royalist elites and businessmen with some liberal Democrats, students and trade unionists led by the main opposition, the People's Alliance for Democracy. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Somchai Wongsawat returned from the APEC leaders meeting in Peru, landing at a military airport. In a televised address, he refused to step down and call a snap election.
I and the authorities will have to solve the problems to bring about peace and order back to our nation. I have ordered an emergency cabinet meeting in order to impose our measures to bring our nation back to normalcy.
Protesters have occupied the Prime Minister's office at Government House since late August, forcing Somchai to run the country from Bangkok's little-used Dongmuang Airport. The PAD wants Somchai out. They accuse him of being the puppet of billionaire Thaksin Shinawatra, the former Prime Minister convicted of corruption and other charges. On October the 7th, thousands of protesters vowed to stop Prime Minister Somchai Wongsawat delivering his maiden policy speech at the Parliament. At least 50 people were injured, 3 seriously.
The conflict in Thailand has been stepped up, but at the root it's still about Thaksin Shinawatra. Somchai's government vowed a constitutional modification to pave the way for Thaksin's return to politics, but this is definitely unacceptable to PAD. The anti-government protesters, or PAD, also asked to change the election procedure of the parliament. Neither side can accept the other, and the confrontation intensified.
Thailand has suffered endless instability, which goes back to 2006, when a military coup brought down Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. The aim of protests is always the same, to get rid of a Thaksin-influenced government.
Our stance is the Prime Minister has to resign. It is as simple as that. We have been here for all this time because Thaksin is the problem.
So why is Thaksin Shinawatra still at the center of controversy? Thaksin is one of the most popular and unpopular prime ministers in recent Thai history. He won the election in 2001 with an overwhelming victory and became the first re-elected prime minister in 2005. To the rural masses, he's the prime minister with a heart, the first leader to focus on the needs and dreams of the millions who live in poverty. But to the urban middle classes, he's a crony capitalist who gambled with the country's economy for the benefit of his family and friends in big business. The protests grow out of deep political and social divides between rural and urban, between poor and rich.
All confrontation is about Thaksin and mainly about Thaksin's policy during his administration. Thaksin's rural policy helped him and his party to gain support from those areas, but hurt the urban middle class's benefits. Thaksin's policy and institutional reform also hurt urban elites' benefits. It magnified the conflict and division between the rural and urban area that already existed. The urban middle class wants their rights and benefits back, so that's why there are endless protests to oust the government.
Recently, Thaksin said he'd return to Thailand and politics if the Thai people need him. The resulting protests have brought the country to what may be a political showdown and speculation about another coup. For now, though, the military seems to favor a new election.
This is not a pressure that we're putting upon the government, but we are suggesting to the government that they should let the people have another chance to make a decision on the future of the country in the new election.
But can a new election really help change Thailand's political landscape? Thaksin and his side draw their support from the rural areas where 70% of the population live. Another election could bring another pro-Thaksin government, effectively changing nothing.
The deadlock in Thailand politics is that if there is an election, there will be a definite victory for Thaksin's power, and this is unacceptable to the PAD. This means the instability in Thailand may still last another 2 years or even more. The final solution must depend on compromise from the two sides, and the time to make this decision will also be long for both sides.
Protests rumble on, and the economy continues to slow. The tourism industry, which makes up 6% of the economy and employs about 1 million people, grew at its slowest rate in more than 3 years in the last quarter. With the latest unrest paralyzing the airport during the peak tourist season and TV networks broadcasting images of the chaos worldwide, the damage this time is likely to be more severe. And until the uncertainty and instability are resolved, Thais are going to pay even more.
Now, if that situation becomes even more critical, many Thais hope that King Bhumibol Adulyadej will intervene, as he has done several times over the years. The king stands above the fray of politics, but he's deeply revered, and his word is the authority of last resort in a country that's still not found its political footing. Well, that brings us to the end of our opening report, and we go now to our first commercial break. But when we come back, we'll tell you about modern-day pirates in Somalia.